Charlie Lyell, back in 1830, he was a lawyer from Scotland. Somebody calculated one time that if all the lawyers in the world were laid end to end around the equator, we would all be better off. Charlie Lyell hated the Bible. In 1830, he wrote this book right here, Principles of Geology. Here it is on this table. Charlie Lyell wrote this book, 1830. In this book, he mocked at scriptures. He hated the Bible. You can see it mocking all through they're here. In here, he and other fellows back in that time, Cuvier, Stratus Smith, and some of these guys, they invented the geologic column. How many have ever heard of the geologic column before? They say each of the layers is a different age. You know, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archeozoic, all them Zoic boys. And they gave each layer of rock a name, like maybe you saw the movie Jurassic Park, and an age, and an index fossil. This was done in 1830, way before there ever was a carbon dating or potassium argon dating or lead-208, lead-206, uranium-235, uranium-238. Didn't exist, folks. The dating technique didn't exist. They just made up these numbers out of the clear blue sky. The geologic column is the Bible for the evolutionist. It can only be found one place in the world, the textbooks. There is no geologic column, and they know it. This fellow says, if there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. The geologic column is a hoax. Does not exist. It is stupid. Those layers cannot be different ages. If the geologic column were all in one place, it would be 100 miles thick. Didn't happen. By the way, if the geologic column were true, if you look at the side of Grand Canyon and see all these thousands of layers, why are there no erosion marks between the layers? Don't you think if one layer sat there for 10 million years waiting for the next one, it would rain once or twice? No erosion marks between the layers. Interesting. Oh, something to consider anyway. Those layers are all deposited very rapidly, and I think we can demonstrate that scientifically. If you take a jar of dirt, put some water in it and shake it up, and set it down, it'll settle into layers for you automatically. It just takes a few minutes. It's called hydrologic sorting. The gravels go to the bottom, and then the sands and the silts and the clays. It'll sort just like that, folks. Go home and do it with a jar. You'll see what I'm talking about. Years ago, I was preaching in Union Center, South Dakota. Union Center is right there. It's not even on the map. There are 40 people in the whole town. 38 of them came to church. I don't know where the other two were. But they showed up later, I guess. But the preacher said, hey, Brother Hovind, let's go down to Rapid City, South Dakota. They've got a museum down there with a bunch of dinosaur bones. I said, all right, I like dinosaurs. Let's go. So we all drove down to the museum. The guide met us at the door. He said, would you like me to give you a tour? We said, that would be great, sir. The first place we stopped on the tour was the geologic time scale, the big chart. They got it behind glass so the kids can't touch it. You know, this is holy, sacred. And the guide said, now, boys and girls, this layer of rock right here is about 70 million years old. My daughter was 12 at the time. She raised her hand. She said, mister, how do you know that layer is 70 million years old? He said, well, honey, we tell the age of the layers by what kind of fossils we find in them. They're called index fossils. Oh, she said, thank you, sir. We walked around the other side of the dinosaur, and we're standing over here, and the guide said, now, folks, these bones you're looking at are about 100 million years old. My daughter raised her hand again. She said, mister, how do you know those bones are 100 million years old? He said, honey, that's a good question. We tell the age of the bones by which layer they come from. She said, excuse me, sir, but when we were standing over there, you told me you knew the age of the layers by the bones, and now you're telling me you know the age of the bones by the layers. She said, isn't that circular reasoning? I thought, wow, a chip off the old block. That guide had the strangest look on his face. It was almost as if he were thinking. He looked at my daughter. He looked at me. I wasn't about to help him. I thought, wow, this is going to be good. I got to hear this. He looked back at my daughter. He said, you know, you're right. That is circular reasoning. I never thought of that before. Folks, geologic column is a joke. It doesn't exist. It's all based on circular reasoning. We can demonstrate that clearly. Get our video number 4 if you want more information on how it's all based on circular reasoning. I'll just give you a couple of quotes here. This guy says, the rocks do date the fossils, but the fossils date the rocks more accurately. Stratigraphy cannot avoid this kind of reasoning if it insists on using only temporal concepts because circularity is inherent. You have to use circular reasoning to get it right. Well, that's stupid. And you don't need to be too bright to figure out that's stupid, okay? This geologic column contains limestone scattered all throughout the geologic column. I like to ask them the question, I say, fellows, you have limestone scattered all through this column. How do you know the age? It's all limestone. I mean, if I handed you a piece of limestone, how would you know if it's 100 million year old Jurassic limestone or 600 million year old Cambrian limestone? I mean, how would you tell the difference? There's only one way they can tell, by the index fossils. That's how it's done, folks. That is stupid. Because those fossils don't count for anything, as we'll see in a minute. They tell the kids each of these layers is a different age. 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, real impressive, huge numbers. Now, Charlie Darwin did not like round numbers. He wanted to be more precise. He said the Wealdian deposits are 306,662,400 years old. Now, okay, Charlie, I think that's stupid. Those layers are not different ages, folks. All over the world we find petrified trees standing up, running through multiple rock layers. Now, if you get a petrified tree standing up, running through different rock layers, I don't think it's smart to say those layers are vastly different ages. Petrified trees in the vertical position, they find them all over the world. Okay, here's one from Alabama. Come out of a seam of coal, through 20 feet of rock, into another seam of coal. They found about 3 dozen of them, I think, in that one little coal mine, one little area, while they're digging the coal out. Petrified trees standing up. Cookeville, Tennessee, they found a bunch of them. This one's 30 feet tall, standing up. Joggins, Nova Scotia is famous for their petrified trees standing up in the vertical position. All over the area there, folks. Those trees did not get slowly covered by the sediments over millions of years. They would rot and fall down. Sometimes the petrified trees are upside down, running through many rock layers. Scientists estimate at the bottom of Spirit Lake in Mount St. Helens there are now 20,000 trees that were blown out by the volcano. Thousands of them are standing up in the bottom of the lake, already buried 15 feet deep in mud. None of them grew there. Those trees are going to petrify. Only takes a few years to petrify a piece of wood. In the laboratory, it can be done in 24 hours. They dug up a guy, they buried this doctor in Tennessee. 14 years later, his wife died. When they went to dig the grave, water soaked into her grave. And they said, oh, we can't bury Grandma there. So they dug a hole on the other side. Water soaked in. So they dug a hole and buried Grandma somewhere else. And then the kids got worried about Grandpa, so they went and dug up his grave. The arms had rotted off, but the rest of the body had petrified in 14 years, turned to stone from water running through the coffin. I got tons of material on how fast things can petrify. Those layers are not different ages. They all formed in one big flood in the days of Noah. To tell the kids the layers are different ages is stupid. That just simply is not true. So all over the world, petrified clams are found. Normally when you find seashells along the beach, as soon as they die, they open. Well, and you hardly ever find a matched pair. But all over the world, petrified clams are found in the closed position. Petrified, closed clams. It had to be buried alive quickly. If the water came up 200 feet and came in at 900 miles an hour, it's going to make a layer of mud 50 feet thick in 10 seconds and bury the clam bits. They find petrified closed clams on top of Mount Everest, tallest mountain in the world full of seashells. Today, the world's record biggest oyster is 14 inches. They find fossilized oysters in the mountains in Peru, 500 of them, all bigger than the world's record. Here's a guy laying on one. There's an 11.5-foot oyster found 2 miles above sea level. I think there was a flood. If the water came up 200 feet and came in at 900 miles an hour, it's going to knock all the trees down and bury them under a layer of mud and form coal. You know, coal is always found in seams, no exception. Sometimes multiple layers of coal. Coal, gravel, well, that's the tide going back and forth, a different tide. Every 6 hours, 12.5 minutes, you'd have a tidal change. Noah was in the ark for 880 tidal changes. The water came up, down, in, out, 880 times. It'd make all these layers in one day, not millions of years. We shook this up a few minutes ago. It's already settling out. Gravel, sand, clay. Give it a few more minutes, see what it does. It does it every time. The flood explains all the geology of the world. There is no such thing as a geologic column. One of the biggest lies ever taught to kids in school. They say during the Archean era, there's no such thing as an Archean era. This geologic column that they teach is the Bible to the evolutionist, number one, and it's an absolute lie. It's interesting, nearly all the major mountain ranges in the world follow the coastlines. But as the mountains are lifting up, the rock layers, these layers that are going to become rock, they're all mud right now, they're going to all be bent, like this picture shows. Bent rock layers are found all over the world. Some of them are just beautiful, gorgeous. Now hold it. If you look at them very closely, you will see they're not fractured, they're not cracked. If these layers are truly different ages, the bottom one's going to be hard rock, then the next one's going to be mud. And when they bend, well, the mud will bend, but the rock is going to crack. But these are all the way down bent, nice, smooth, bent rock layers. No fractures internally. That means all the layers were soft when they were bent at the same time. These bent rock layers all over the world are clear evidence that the flood formed those layers quickly. You're going to be taught in school that the layers of the earth are different ages, and they've got names for them, the Jurassic and Triassic and Mississippian and Devonian, Cretaceous era and all that stuff. The whole thing is baloney. There is no geologic column anywhere in the world. All those layers are the same age.